And we are live. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents, and welcome back to Today with 2 Cents, wrapping up your weekly news. I am going to warn everyone beforehand. I am exhausted. It has been a very long week. So if my thoughts are all over the place and I have trouble keeping it together, I apologize in advance. But as always, joined by a handful of my patrons here, Night Shift 10,000, Mag, and Scorch 88, to discuss what I believe to be the biggest news stories of the week, or even if they weren't the biggest, just the ones I want to talk about. Because let's be honest, the most widely publicized news story of this week was probably the Mueller report being published with redactions. I've already said everything I have to say about that. I have no desire to talk about butthurt Democrats who can't accept the fact that Trump did not collude with the Russians. So anyways, we'll be putting that one by the wayside. First story I want to talk about, and those of you who saw the video I released this week, it is related to that. But last week, Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar was giving a speech at CAIR, that is the Council on American Islamic Relations. During the course of her speech, she said, and I quote, "Here's the truth. For far too long, we," referring to American Muslims, "have lived with the discomfort of being a second-class citizen. Frankly, I'm tired of it, and every single Muslim in this country should be tired of it. CAIR was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties." Now, referring specifically to the 9/11 terrorist attacks as some people did something, I know Representative Dan Cranshaw, former Navy SEAL, tweeted out that it was absurd for her to refer to such a violent, atrocious act as some people did something. President Trump then tweeted out a video in which her comments, "some people did something," were put to music and tied in with footage of the planes hitting the tower and the planes hitting the Pentagon. But Democrats shot back and said that this was condemning her for this was Islamophobia. They claim her comments were taken out of context and that, in fact, allegedly death threats to Omar went up after this. And Trump's comments is inciting violence against Omar. So the question being, is on one hand, you've got people saying it's absolutely ridiculous to refer to terrorism as some people did something. On the other hand, you should not be inciting violence against an American Muslim who did nothing wrong. Well, I certainly have a lot to say on the topic of Ilhan Omar. I certainly have a lot to say on the topic of Islam itself as a religion, but I'll let you guys jump in and then we'll address her comments on their own.
I would say
Ilhan Omar. Hold on, just let me say something. Does anyone here remember Michael Moore's comments right after 9/11? Basically, when he literally came up and said there is no terrorist threat. Does anyone remember that or?
No.
I was a little too young.
Yeah.
Well, that was what Michael. That's like Michael Moore levels of idiocy because he did right after 9/11. He literally came out and said, there is no terrorist threat. That is on the same levels of stupidity that Ilhan Omar is on right now. As God.
Mm-hmm. Now, I guess my opinion is this. I think the fact that I will say there is some, I don't think there's a lot of merit to saying her comments were taken out of context. I do think when you simply quote her saying some people did something, that does ignore the fact that she was speaking at the Council on American Islamic Relations. Thus, her entire audience was probably American Muslims. And in that regard, I mean, yes, that speech wasn't just given to some random group of Americans. It was all American Muslims. Nonetheless, I do not think that excuses referring to violent terrorism as some people did something. And as I said in my video, Why the Left Loves Islam and How to Debunk It, which was originally a Patrons exclusive, I just re-released it yesterday in light of this because I thought it was an important discussion to have. I need to be absolutely clear about this. I acknowledge not all Muslims are terrorists. I know Islam is not a monolithic religion. Within it, there are literally thousands of sects, just like there are within most major religions. So it would be unfair and irresponsible of me to say that all Muslims are terrorists or to say that anyone who identifies as a Muslim necessarily is pro-terrorism or anything like that. However, I don't think you can ignore if for those that take the time to study Islam, study the Quran, study the Hadith, study the life of the Prophet Muhammad, and take its claims seriously and see how it's played out in history, you can't deny the fact that there is a much larger connection between violence and Islam than any other religion in history I can think of. And therefore, it's just to try to claim that terror. Okay, it's one thing to say not all Muslims are terrorists. That's true. It's another thing to say that the terrorists and people who do commit terrorism don't have anything that's not real Islam. It has nothing to do with Islam, because they have very robust theological explanations for why they do what they do. And that's a conversation that needs to be had, not one that's shut down in the name of political correctness.
Right.
In terms of just one thing I kind of wanted to say, it's a very bland statement, but I'm just going to say it. She has the right to say whatever the heck that she wants, but if we're going to be talking about people's death, people who died, you better be prepared to get some backlash.
Absolutely. And another thing that needs to be pointed out, some of the statements she made are factually inaccurate. She says that the Council on American-Islamic Relations was founded after 9/11. That is incorrect. It was founded in the 1990s, specifically, I believe, 1994. Also, the Council on American-Islamic Relations claims it is simply a civil rights group trying to help create good discussion between American Muslims and the American government or the American people. Nonetheless, remains a fact that the Council on American-Islamic Relations has been accused of supporting terrorist groups such as Hamas. Admittedly, I'm not an expert on this, but it is my understanding that the Council on American-Islamic Relations, in a massive terrorist investigation conducted by the FBI between 2007 and 2008, the Council for American-Islamic Relations was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in a plot to raise money for the terrorist group Hamas. Members of CARE have ties with the Muslim Brotherhood, Hezbollah, Hamas, all other known terrorist groups. So that's not, that's not something I've personally taken the time to research in detail. So undoubtedly, there are probably some apologists of the organization that would have rebuttals to those claims. But at the very least, where there's smoke, there tends to be fire. So I think it would be irresponsible to just not to investigate that group further if it actually has been caught fundraising and having ties to known terrorists.
Well, I would almost say investigate the group, actually.
Well, yeah, I would say I would say investigate the group. But and that also speaks to the fact when people talk about, and I'm just gonna not to make this. I'm gonna try to have. I'm going to look into getting some people to come as guests on my channel. Hopefully those that are would be considered experts in Islam and take various sides. And I'd like to have a debate about this. But whether or not it's also in the research I've done, even when you're dealing with groups that claim to represent moderate Islam, like the Council on American-Islamic Relations, or there are other countries like the United Arab Emirates, or that are called moderate Muslim countries as opposed to countries like Saudi Arabia or Islam. Even in the cases of the so-called moderate groups, you find within them a disturbingly high number of people that if not terrorists themselves, have favorable things to say about terrorists or are raising money for terrorists. So again, something that it's an honest discussion that needs to be had, not something shut down in the name of political correctness.
Even if one thing that would help them with, they don't want to have discussions, but the thing is that if they have discussions, they can defend them saying that, no, this isn't true because blah, 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 blah. Defend yourself, not just shut us down. It just makes you look bad in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Mag, you're giving these people way too much credit. Believe me.
Oh, I know that. I'm very aware of that, but I'm very aware of that.
If you disagree with them on one thing, you are a Nazi. Fascist.
Look where I am in Commie, California. I am very aware.
I used to live there.
It's just so it's irritating. It's so irritating.
Again, I'm in Commie, California. I understand.
Oh yeah.
And I don't even, on the topic of Islam, I don't even need to encourage people to look at a group like Jihad Watch or any other quote unquote anti-Islamic organization. I say, if you're out there and you want to know more about Islam, read the Quran, read the Hadith traditions like Al-Bukhari, get a history book and look into the history of Muhammad.
Oh yeah.
I think using solely Islamic sources, even in my video, How to Debunk Islam, I've already seen comments from Muslim apologists trying to respond to it. But I did my efforts to show that Islam is false. All I used was the Quran's own words itself compared to what we know historically. But I say
the problem with that is most people don't read it. Most people just
exactly.
like, yeah, let's just follow it, even though do not read it.
Yes, I encourage people. If you want to know about Judaism, you need to study the Torah. If you want to know about Christianity, you need to study the New Testament. You want to know about Islam, you need to study the Quran. You need to study Hadith. Regardless of whether you're a member of that religion yourself or someone criticizing it or someone who's just generally interested to know what what a religion's all about. You can't just look at what the news media says. You can't look at what people who identify as being members of that religion say. You got to look at what the founders of that religion believed and what they taught and what they did, more importantly.
Well, and here's what I say about it. Okay, here's what I say. Say what you will about organized Christianity. I don't remember the part of the Bible where Jesus literally executed 900 people in the streets of a holy city and then married a 6-year-old. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's you couldn't talk about the battles of Jesus because Jesus was not a military or a political leader. Exactly. Muhammad on the other hand, you can talk all of you can say Islam is a religion of peace. It doesn't change the fact historically Muhammad was a military leader. He did forcibly seize land and violently kill his enemies, like the story that you just spoke, where he had something like 800 to 900 Jews beheaded in one night, and then had their wives and children made into sex slaves. I mean, and that's coming from Islamic. I mean, I'm not just plucking that from some quote unquote anti-Islam website. That comes from the Islamic Hadith tradition themselves.
Yep.
So, anyways, that's a like I said, I sometime in the near future, I'm hoping to have a stream solely on that topic. So we'll not say too much about it. But moving on. President Trump this week vetoed a congressional resolution. Now, this nobody really talked about this in light of the Mueller reports and all the more exciting things to talk about Trump, but I thought it was actually probably more interesting to see that President Trump vetoed a resolution to end U.S. military support for the Saudi-led coalition war in Yemen. For those of you who are not familiar, ever since in 2014, a rebel group called the Houthis, which are backed by the government of Iran, successfully overthrew the Yemeni government, which the Yemeni government represented the Sunni sect of Islam, like Saudi Arabia. The Houthis represent the Shia sect of Islam, like Iran. And essentially, Saudi Arabia and Iran have been fighting a proxy war in the country of Yemen, the U.S. supporting the Saudi-backed coalition, and Iran and its allies like Russia and Syria indirectly supporting the Houthis. Now Congress passed a resolution to end such support, which President Trump vetoed. Doesn't exactly seem to be in line with his America First, end endless wars. I guess actually I'm not sure if Trump used the phrase endless wars. That's other politicians who've used that, but it doesn't sound like something that goes with the Make America Great Again, put America first agenda. And of course, for those that are on the Trump train, Donald Trump can do no wrong, so they don't really care. But it's worth talking about again the fact that George Bush brought us into the Middle East with the war in Iraq. President Obama condemned it, yet when he went to office, he started a massive drone campaign in the Middle East. He's the one who had Gaddafi taken down in Libya and has been very active in the Middle East. And now President Trump, despite his claims to pull troops out of Syria, and he's now vetoed this in Yemen. What's going on here? Well, again, you have to remember that ever since 1973, the government of Saudi Arabia has been critical in upholding the petrodollar globally. In other words, because the Saudis remain, at least for the time being, remain the largest producer of, or at least the king of oil production in the world. Having Saudi Arabia on our side in encouraging all countries around the world to only use the U.S. dollar to trade oil, which is the only thing that's really upholding the value of the U.S. dollar anymore, is still in effect and has been in effect. And therefore, the U.S. government will never, no matter how oppressive the Saudi government may be towards its own people, no matter how many human rights violations may take place there, no matter how many journalists like Jamal Khashoggi are killed by the Saudi government, or however many just or unjust wars are undertaken by the Saudi government, the U.S. will never stand against Saudi Arabia so long as the Saudis are critical in upholding the petrodollar.
Well,
Pretty much.
there might be an opportunity for that, though. There might be an opportunity for them to abandon Saudi Arabia, and that's if Venezuela starts upholding the petrodollar at some point.
Which is always a possibility. We can see the U.S. is quite interested in how that conflict turns out, especially given the fact that with fracking and other technologies and the rise in global oil prices, Venezuela and Canada now have bigger oil reserves than Saudi Arabia.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Todd Rankles, thank you very much for the super chat. Very generous super chat at that. So I will go ahead and read his comment here. Ilhan Omar delving deeply into the culture war should tell us all we need to know. She's a plant in obstruction. She has embarrassed herself in her committee over and over again. She's dumb. I don't care her race or religion. Well, I can't say I disagree there. Regardless of your religion, regardless of your race, regardless of your position, if you say stupid stuff, you're going to get criticized. That's what freedom of speech means. Deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just stop using the US dollar and then we'll just die, please? This will stop everything.
That's agorism.
That's what agorism is all about.
That was what I was leading to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's why the central bankers around. It's why many countries have attempted to outlaw cryptocurrency. It's why central banks are so against cryptocurrency. But as countries like Russia and China that have outlawed cryptocurrency have already figured out, great, it's outlawed. But what are you going to do about it? How are you going to stop people from using it? You can't.
Yep.
So anyways, another thing I do want to point out, Yemen, if anyone wants to go ahead and get on Google, pull up a map of Yemen where it's located. Now, Yemen itself is really just a piece of dirt sitting there in the right there at the crossroads of the Middle East. Yemen itself has no natural resources, but because of its proximity to major economic shipping routes that transport oil from Saudi Arabia, from Iran, from other parts of the Middle East, whoever controls that territory from both economic and a military standpoint has huge sway over the transportation of oil. And so obviously just about every country in the Middle East and every country in the world has a vested interest in who controls that territory. So for that reason, say what you will, whether he should or shouldn't be doing it. It doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if it was Trump sitting in the White House. It wouldn't matter if it was Clinton. It wouldn't matter if it was Andrew Yang or anybody else. There's no way that the U.S. is going to end its military support or its military action in the region when you understand the petrodollar, when you understand why whoever controls that region, the control of that region is so important from an international economic standpoint.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
Wouldn't kind of the way to solve that is just having another trade route instead of having to only go through one area? Just saying, if you don't want to trade with those people, go somewhere else.
Well, true, but when you consider shipping lanes by sea and the geography of the region, it's limited. So that's
true.
That's kind of what we've got going on there.
Well, I'm not a map, so I didn't know what it was, so I was kind of just talking out my ass.
Okay, yeah. Everybody, go ahead, Google map Yemen, Middle East. You'll see what I mean. Right there by the Horn of It's in Yemen itself is in the Middle East. It's right across in the Horn of Africa. I forget the name of that economic strait that's there by the Red Sea, but it's a very important one, and most of the Middle Eastern oil gets shipped out of there.
The Suez Canal through the Suez Canal.
You know what? This is bothering me. I'm gonna Google it.
Because
screen share it so we all know it.
I believe they go through the Red Sea, don't they? They go through the Red Sea.
Yes, the Suez Canal there in Egypt. All right. Yeah, the Suez Canal is in Egypt. It connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. If you sail through the Red Sea, you will pass between Yemen and Somalia, and then that goes out into the Indian Ocean. So, in particular, there's a particular economic port right there on the southernmost tip of Yemen. That's a critical stopping point there for all ships that are coming in between the Arabian Sea and the Red Sea to the Strait of Hormuz and the Mediterranean Sea.
Geography, yay!
No, I thought you were talking about the Suez Canal directly because that's where they all go through. But yeah,
Mhm.
The name escapes me too, but there is some kind of major port there, and oh god, I don't remember what it is. Shoot.
Mhm.
Now
Well, I'm
we're-
not going to Google that one. Like I said, normally I would have done a bit more research before the stream. Like I said, I'm exhausted. I've had a very crazy week. I'm not going to bore you with your time with that, but like, hey, Google exists, people, or DuckDuckGo or whatever other search engine you want to use. You don't need me to tell you the name. You can figure it out yourself. And I see Todd Rankles gave another super chat. Thank you very much. Jang, he wants to regulate cryptocurrency. I think you mean Andrew Yang, not Jang, unless there's some other person named Jang that I'm unaware of.
Oh man, regulate cryptocurrency.
Well, good luck
That's
with
fun.
that.
All right. Moving on. Next news story of the week. I'm sure everybody knows about the tragic fire in France. The Notre Dame Cathedral, which has stood ever since the Middle Ages, underwent a massive fire. The structure is still standing. Looks like there's going to be a move to rebuild it, with many wealthy donors in Europe donating millions of dollars, millions of euros to rebuild Notre Dame. I'm sure everybody, if you've seen The Hunchback of Notre Dame, then you at least have seen a cartoon of the cathedral. But the cathedral itself is very old, and regardless of your personal religious convictions, it holds a great deal of history and cultural significance to France, to the Middle Ages, to the Enlightenment and beyond. And so from that respect, it is definitely a tragedy. Now, I know the official explanation for this fire is that it was an accident. Although all the research I've done, there is still an investigation ongoing. Obviously, I'm in no position to confirm or deny what really happened. I do know that throughout the month of March, all throughout the country of France, there have been other cases of arson, documented cases of arson by Muslims against churches and other sites. Now, again, that the fact that there have been cases of arson by Muslims against Christian sites in France does not prove that that is what happened in this case, but I'd say it at least merits a detailed investigation.
Yeah, they can make up their explanations all they want, but I think we all know what actually happened here. Quasimodo, dude, he got pissed and decided to burn that bitch down.
Yeah, I finally got sad that Esmeralda ran off with the good-looking guy.
Yep.
But all right,
We were
I can't resist. I don't want to go down too many tangents. I can't resist this one though. Hunchback of Notre Dame was, in my opinion, an entertaining movie. Not one of my favorites as far as Disney goes, but if you haven't seen it, you should.
The music was awesome too. Seriously,
yeah,
some of the best music I've heard in any Disney movie.
Agreed. And you were kind of saying before the stream started that the people in France were mad that the rich people were doing all of this and not focusing on their cost of what they were doing. Do you want to go into that?
We're just about to get into that. So everyone will remember a couple months ago, the Yellow Vest riots all throughout France. After France tried to institute a carbon tax, the working man took to the street, fed up with Macron and his government and high taxes, putting on their yellow vests, which are something drivers in France are required to wear, professional drivers, that is. And they started rioting against Macron and the government of France. Now, as far as international news, the yellow vests have not gone away, make no mistake. But as far as international news coverage, big outlets like the BBC, CNN, others have moved on from that and focused on more important things like the Mueller investigation. Or more important may not be the right term, but the things they wanted to talk about. Well, anyways, after Notre Dame, yes, after Notre Dame, and all these wealthy European donors came out wanting to rebuild Notre Dame. The Yellow Vests, actually, this article was just released today, 10 hours ago. I'm looking at it right now on Fox News. France's Yellow Vest protesters returned to the streets enraged by billions pledged to rebuild Notre Dame. Basically, the Yellow Vest rioters are angry that all these wealthy donors are so gung-ho about rebuilding Notre Dame. They're not gung-ho about the common working man in France, and therefore they've started rioting hardcore in Paris and around the country again, claiming that the outrage over Notre Dame is ridiculous when they should be outraged over the plight of the common French man and the Yellow Vest riots.
Yeah, you know, I wanted to root for those guys. I really did up until about this point. God, you know, I was really pulling for them because they were up against taxes like the carbon tax.
Oh yeah, I thought many of their complaints against the French government were absolutely valid, but
There's many sectors of the Yellow Vest movement. There's a lot of anarchists, communists, and others.
mhm.
Well, they came off almost. Oops, never mind. Go ahead, Meg.
The thing that these people need to understand is like, it's not anything really personally against them. It just keep in mind these people who are rich, they care about their community. With my family, a lot of other people who are middle class and above, we extremely care about the communities they are from, and something that has such a historical significance within your community, you would absolutely want to donate your money, making it so that it will be up and running, to not have it to be destroyed. Take an example: if the Sixth Chapel got burned down out on all like the art would not, or a lot of the art was like destroyed, people would want to donate their money or their time and resources, etc., to rebuild it back up. It's not anything against you. They just care about the community and the history that comes from this place, and they very much care about that.
Hang on a second, Meg. Did you say the Sixth Chapel?
I don't know how you say it.
Okay, I think you meant the Sistine Chapel.
I don't know how you say it.
Okay.
I frankly don't care.
the Apostolic Palace, basically.
Yeah.
All right. If you're referring to the chapel that Michelangelo painted, the famous scene of God reaching out to man on the ceiling, then yes, that would be the Sistine Chapel. But yes, I think everyone knows.
The point wasn't the name. The point of the history that comes from that place.
Yes.
Or say like the Colosseum, if that got burned down, people would absolutely wouldn't be donating their time and money to restoring it.
Mm-hmm. Now, and I think what this shows, and what disappoints me with the Yellow Vest Riders, and shows that they actually, at least a large portion of them, are buying into the whole ANCOM narrative, is that they see rich donors as their enemies. It is not the rich that are your enemy. The government is your enemy, and I think that their criticism of Macron and ridiculous carbon taxes were absolutely valid. But if you're claiming that that rich people somehow owe you money and aren't free to spend their money as they wish, then you're getting into Marxist territory. So
you should have them be on your side, not against. Say, for example, these working man people, they live in your community. Wouldn't you want to be siding also with them as well? Just saying, let's work together, not against each other.
Right.
All right. And this isn't really a news story, but it is something that happened this week that I think merits at least a few minutes of discussion. I tweeted out earlier this week a link to the new Star Wars trailer for Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. And after now, for those of you who were at the Patrons monthly hangout last week, we talked about Star Wars quite a bit. And this was before that trailer was released. And I talked about how utterly disappointed I have been with Episode 7 and Episode 8. The question is, Disney by now ought to know most people were heavily disappointed with Episode 7 and Episode 8. Will Episode 9 be a success? All we can tell from the trailer is that it looks like Mark Hamill will be returning as Luke Skywalker. Yes, Luke Skywalker died, but he must be coming back as a Force ghost or something. And there's also a hint at the end. You hear the laugh of Palpatine. So a hint that Emperor Palpatine will be coming back.
Well, there's also a theory.
Right
there's also a theory that Rey is actually a Palpatine.
A child of Palpatine or a family member of Palpatine.
Yes. Possibly a direct descendant, yes.
There's also another theory that what's that guy's name? In like the 7th movie, that kind of like big kind of villain guy, the gray guy.
Supreme Leader Snoke.
Yeah, him. People theorize that Palpatine is him.
Yes, I've heard that.
Now, if they make him be him, I will be less disappointed. But at the same time, knowing how the series is going, even if they do that, I don't see them doing it well.
Okay. The theory that I was hearing about this week is everyone was like shocked that Snoke was killed in Episode 8. Like, really? This big bad villain, he's dead just like that? The theory I've been hearing is that Snoke's not really dead. Like, Snoke was Palpatine, and like that was just some kind of body or clone he had created basically Palpatine's consciousness. Palpatine is dead, but his consciousness lives in the Force now, and he can possess bodies and stuff. And the idea being that he'll return. Even though Kylo Ren killed that particular body, his consciousness needs to find another host, and he'll be coming back. Or Go ahead.
If that was true, now granted, it may be because he's using the dark side of the Force, but even so, wouldn't you think someone like Yoda, someone like him, have so much knowledge and so much, I guess you could say, Force? Why wouldn't he now become the Force? That doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't Yoda be in there somewhere? And it would make sense for them to do that just because Yoda is such a popular character.
Well, here's what they might be doing. Here's what they might be doing with Yoda and Palpatine. They might be doing it like a yin-yang thing, where like Yoda is the good side of the Force, kind of personified, and Palpatine is like the evil side of the Force. Yeah,
they already did that, though.
It's like a yin-yang thing, sort of.
They already did that. They did that in the prequels.
I know. Well, here's my theory. Here's my theory about it is that we are going to find out by some huge twist that Rey is actually Luke Skywalker's daughter, and that when Kylo Ren basically told her, you were just a child of a bunch of junk traders that left you behind because of a bet, that he was actually manipulating her, and that she was giving into the manipulation because she was giving into fear, and that she actually is like Luke Skywalker's daughter or something like that. And it's going to be, they're going to create like this big, huge twist, but really it's just going to be like this malformed plot point.
The problem I have with that being Rey's father, I can't speak from it, is the fact that if we look, the Force is very similar to Buddhism, if I have it correct. And if we look at it, unlike in the prequels,
I think it's Zoroastrianism is what.
Well, it's more like animatism, actually.
Okay.
Well, anyway.
Well, Zoroastrianism was an. Okay, fine. Mag, finish your point.
Basically, unlike in the prequels when they had it to where, I'm going to rebel and be with the person I love. In the normal, why is his name slipping me for a minute? What is the guy's name?
Luke.
Yes, Luke. He didn't go off with a romantic partner, unlike it was in the prequels. So the thing is, who is he going to actually be with? Because he's focusing more of his time on with the Force and whatnot. Now, maybe it was when he actually left the Force for some stupid reason. But, again, he's not the type of person in the story to actually be with someone. So, who's the mother?
Mara Jade, I would think. But that's the thing, though. They should not have made the Extended Universe novels non-canon, because the Extended Universe novels, they were building up to all the plot points in this. Because Mara Jade was Luke Skywalker's wife. They actually had a son named Ben Skywalker, who was kind of adopted by Leia and Han, who became kind of like
who's breathing.
And they also had Mara Jade and Luke Skywalker also had a mysterious, unknown, unnamed daughter towards the end of the Extended Universe novels with Luke. So, in all honesty, they really shouldn't have thrown those aside, because it seems like, the Extended Universe novels were really leading up to the sequels.
Yep. And the only thing I'll say is they had it right there on a silver platter, and they ruined it.
Honestly, I'm really hoping they bring Mara Jade back into continuity, because she was so epic in the Extended Universe novels. And
epic or hot, I must ask.
Yeah.
They were books, Mag. It's all up to your imagination. And
all right.
Seeing as Night Shift and I share an imagination, from what I can tell, he probably thought she was pretty hot.
Well, they had illustrations of her. And in all the illustrations of her, she was hot. Oh my God.
I haven't actually read the book, so that's why I asked. I should though, but I haven't.
All I have to say is that I'm against abortion, but I think it's okay to abort all of this.
Anyways,
I didn't hear what he said. What did he say?
He said he's against abortion, but we can abort Star Wars.
It's technically not a real thing, so.
It's a little late for that.
Yeah. Disney is going to milk this cash cow for all it's worth. So long as people keep seeing it, they'll keep making them.
Yep.
Yeah, but the thing is, because it's gone so downhill lately, especially after 8 and whatnot, they're not making money off these films. They're definitely not by this next one, because the reputation for these films have already been destroyed. People aren't going to go watch for the third one other than people who are like movie critics and go like, maybe it'll be better this time. But most people in the reputation, they've already ruined their reputation basically. So I don't see them making money, or at least not as much as I would want to.
I don't. Yeah, it'll all depend on. I think how it does opening weekend is going to set the trend for how well this one does.
Though, hey, it's a good example of, oh, do you really hate the prequels now? Looking at them compared. By the way, who likes the prequels? I do.
I like
I
the
know that's
third
a
one, and
debate.
that's it. I like number 3, and that's it.
Yeah, I can see that.
I'll refer everyone to last week's live stream for my thoughts on the prequels. I already spilled the beans on that.
I wasn't here, unfortunately, so wham.
All right. Well, before we get going down that, we could have this conversation go on for a long time. And believe me, I would like to. But so that this stream doesn't go too long, anyway, everyone ready for the weekly hottie?
Yes, please.
Yes.
All right.
I need my daily dose.
Somebody give me a drum roll. All right. This week's weekly hottie is another rerun. I try not to repeat weekly hotties too often, but in this case, I simply could not resist. I'm going to go and click on my screen, make sure it stays up there. But Christina Khalil, one of my favorite YouTube models, posted this week a lingerie haul called Eve's Temptation. And boy, that was appropriately named. So without further ado, here is Christina Khalil. And give me a second to get my music up here. Ladies and gentlemen, Christina Khalil.
Like you chose new music.
Yeah, same. I really like the new music there, buddy.
Yeah.
All right. Like I said, I had to shake it up, so I know I've gotten some complaints about the music, so I looked for some new stuff, and hopefully I'll find some more copyright-free good stuff.
Yep.
Nice.
People, please help this man out so we can actually edit at least this little section of it.
Yes, please.
Please.
If you're listening to this, please get on My Two Senses Patreon. Help this
or
guy
subscribe
out
star.
because he's epic. Or yeah, subscribe star too.
Actually, I should let everyone know, 2 weeks ago, we passed the $200 threshold. Someone got on and pledged $15, and within 1 hour of making his pledge, he deleted it. So, not sure.
Darn.
Hurt my hand. Ah.
So, again, you guys don't owe me anything, but if we are that close, so.
Please do.
Actually, what surprises me is, I mean, Two Cents, your videos are so awesome. What surprises me is that you don't have more subscribers and more funding, that you can't quit your jobs and just do this. I mean, that's what really surprises me here.
I wish I could do that, but if it's ever going to get to that, I am going to need you guys' help. So to all those of you who are patrons, thank you so much. I love you so much for making my channel possible. And for all those out there who may be on the fence considering it, we're really close to getting the regular edited episodes 2 cents back. So
it's only $1. And to answer your question, Knight, it's probably just because half of his videos are probably not monetized.
Yeah.
That's the
well, there's
important
that.
bit of it.
But it's not quite that simple. But yeah, plenty of my videos are demonetized. Anyways, thanks everybody for coming to Hangout. As I said, no, I try to think of something wittier to say, but I'm really tired right now. So all I can say is thanks for coming to the stream. And as always, that is my 2 cents. So take it for what it's worth.
Taxation's death. Bye.